Mr. Kramer, we can go ahead and get you, squeeze you in here at this point.
Oh, good. Hi. I'm a researcher with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights of Florida, and since I'm not really supposed to ask questions, I guess I'll reframe these as statements. Very briefly, aside from the horrific side effects on children such as lactating breast on young boys, tardive dyskinesia, diabetes, and dramatic weight gain, and aside from the thousands of lawsuits against the antipsychotic drug makers and the many lawsuits by state's attorney general, and despite the fact that no one knows the long-term effects of these high-powered mind-altering drugs on children, there's one point here, and that has to do with money, Florida Medicaid money. Per Florida Medicaid rules, in order for a drug's use to be reimbursed, it must be approved by the FDA or listed with a supporting citation in one of 3 drug compendiums. For example, Diodin, one of the atypical antipsychotics you're talking about, has no FDA approval for children for any indication, and there are 0 supporting indications listed in the said drug compendiums. So this was a question I was going to ask, but I'm now going to make a statement, and the statement is Florida Medicaid should not be reimbursing millions upon millions of dollars over the last few years for Diodin for children, when in fact there is no FDA approval, there are no supporting citations, and it is against Florida Medicaid rules. You know, in these times of financial, when the states are begging for money here and there, here's a place right here where the state is just throwing it out the window, and it's going against its own rules. Another thing I'd like to make a statement on is, why are you just looking at 5 and under? Why don't you look at all kids? Why don't you also look at the elderly, where these black box warning antipsychotic drugs applies to dementia? So there you go. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. I think at this point our Chief Legal Counsel, Craig Smith, would like to make a statement.
I was just going to clarify for the record, since we're here in a public meeting. In response, really it was kind of to a point that Mr. Davis had raised, which is something Ann Wells said right at the beginning. The purpose of this meeting in the committee is for AHCA's Medicaid program to take recommendations on the appropriate Medicaid reimbursement coverage for these types of drugs for this population. And we are getting the expert input from the panel members, and that's the purpose. But it is not the Medicaid program that decides or prescribes drugs for children. It's doctors, and with what Ann Wells said at the beginning, that has to be in conjunction with the parents or the guardian's consent for this population. So just to clarify that is the purpose here today, is to really work toward the appropriate Medicaid reimbursement policy upon the expert advice of the panel, and we really appreciate all of the panel's participation.
At that point, I think we're at 1:30, and we know that our physician participants are busy and probably need to get back to patients, as our audience attendees in the room. I want to thank everybody today for coming in and participating and giving us very excellent opinions and advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take the tabulations that we have and decide where we go from here.
Do you know how many of those were approved and how many were denied?
I can tell you that.
I think just
Let's see. 344 approved, 87 denied.
how would I find out what they were denied for? How would I find out what the denials are based on?
Well, recommendations from the child psychiatrist who reviewed the documentation that was submitted by the prescribing physician.
I'm sorry.
Well, that was the recommendation of the child psychiatrist who reviewed.
Right. But in 87 cases, they were denied by the psychiatrist at USF. I guess how can we find out what those denials are based on?
I think you run into it's individual patient clinical review, and you run into some HIPAA. issues and confidentiality issues looking at individual patients. So I'm not clear that you can, other than the reviewing psychiatrist for, I mean, multiple reasons. It's a complex review.
I mean, are there patterns? Is it polypharmacy? Are there other reasons that are coming up over and over again in these 87 so far?
It's a range. It's a range.
Is it just that for a use that isn't approved? I mean, or
well, there's not a lot of approved. That's why.
Or even for adults. I mean, even for
No, I think it's a range of issues, dosing, what the treatment, the total treatment plan in terms of follow-up. I mean, it's a variety. I wouldn't say that there's a pattern that comes over and over again.
And when was the committee going to meet again?
We didn't define it. We haven't figured out. Drivers and 2 patients and physicians, and we're trying to balance everyone's needs without being too burdensome. I mean, we hear all of the stakeholders, and we just want to make sure we stay focused on the right thing.
Have you heard complaints from doctors about this prior authorization?
Well, complaints from doctors is not unique to this drug category or this patient population. So, yeah, but we hear complaints related to other prior authorizations and other patient populations.
Just a process question.
Okay.
You have this group that you're set up and doing this review.